You know, I still remember it to this day. It was summer 2006 and I was glued to the television when the England squad was being announced for the World Cup. At this point, we all expected the same names on that squad. The Beckhams, the Lampards, the Gerrards, pretty much all the Senators. But there was one name on that list that shocked the world of football, a player that no one knew about, and for a good reason. You see, the player in question didn't even have a single minute of top-flight football in his life. I still remember following up on newspapers about who this kid was. And yes, newspapers were still a thing back in the day. It was an odd selection, to be honest, taking an unproven teenager as your fourth striker, especially when you had an injury-prone striker like Michael Owen and an injured Wayne Rooney racing against time to make it to the World Cup. He didn't know it then, but soon he'd be thrown in a boiling environment along with teammates he had only seen on his wall posters. That kid was Theo Walcott, and now he was on the plane with the golden generation to play in the World Cup. All that aside, you could understand why they were being called the golden generation. A squad that had Beckham, Gerrard, Lampard, Rooney, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, and I'm not even halfway through. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for England where we had all these players at their prime. A lot was expected from the golden generation. They were expected to go far. Hell, maybe even win the World Cup, a trophy that's been missing since they last won it in 1966. This was a time that it was coming home before the song became popular again a decade later. But the team would crash out of the World Cup against Portugal on penalties, just as they did 2 years ago against Portugal, also on penalties.
Oh shit, here we go again.
England would go out of the tournament with regrets about not capitalizing on this massive opportunity. The golden generation have failed. Or did they? Well, as an outsider looking in, I could understand the golden generation label for the obvious reasons. What I couldn't understand is that why is their journey considered a failure by the pundits and the media, especially when all the other rivals were similarly stocked with world-class talents, with some of them having the golden generation of their own. In this video, I'm gonna talk about why England's golden generation shouldn't be considered a failure and actually met the expectations by their own standards and the standards of their rivals. I also have AFC Finners, a YouTube channel that focuses on the history of football, debate the other side of the question on why the golden generation should be considered a failure. So stick around till the end. Let's go all the way to the summer 2006 and take a look at what the other teams had in the World Cup. While we can go on how amazing the golden generation was on paper, it was against some of the best players of that decade. Defending champions Brazil had the likes of Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká, Cafu, Roberto Carlos, Dida. Honestly, I can still go on and on. That Brazil team was really scary on paper. The eventual champions Italy had Buffon, Nesta, Cannavaro, Pirlo, Gattuso, and Totti in a team that, unlike England, actually gelled together. The finalists, France, had the likes of Zidane, Patrick Vieira, Thierry Henry, Lilian Thuram, and a young Franck Ribéry. I also have to add the fact that some of these players have won the Euros and the World Cup in the past. The host Germany had the likes of Michael Ballack, Schweinsteiger, Philipp Lahm, and played some exhilarating football as a team. And we're not even touching on Argentina, Netherlands, and Spain. Just like England, those teams had amazing players in their prime as well, and they weren't even called the golden generation. It was just a normal generation for them. But they had something that England didn't have. They had chemistry. You could see clear patterns of play when you watched them, whereas England players looked a shadow of themselves in that tournament. It also didn't help that they had two injured strikers, a teenager, and Peter Crouch up front. Honestly, how do you expect that front line to deliver the World Cup? And I say that with utmost love for Peter Crouch. Many of you younger viewers don't remember that, but for whatever reason, the English players were allowed to travel with their family, children, and probably their horses too, which caused a scene that was known as WAGs, which literally stood for wives and girlfriends. I guess a lot of creativity was used to come up with that term. While every other team was fully focused on winning the World Cup, England's camp was filled with drama coming from the WAGs. I honestly couldn't open a newspaper without seeing a headline from England's camp. And all of this while the team was supposed to be focused on performing at the World Cup. And players forming their own factions based on their club rivalries when unity was required didn't help the matters either. And by the way, I haven't even touched on the tactical issues yet. With all the off-the-field distractions, things were not brilliant on the pitch either. I don't know, dude. It just seemed like Sven-Goran Eriksson wanted to jam-pack all the stars into starting 11, regardless of compatibility. It honestly felt like he was putting square pegs in round holes at times. I can go on and on about why we shouldn't have expected England to go beyond where they did in 2006. At the end of the day, compared to the quality of other rivals, and especially with all the in-house problems, England was no more than just a quarter-final team. Maybe semi-final at best. And they did just that. And therefore, it shouldn't be called a failure. England actually met the expectations. I think it's important to consider the quality of the other teams as well. And honestly, the golden generation was stacked against some mad teams. And losing on penalties is nothing to be ashamed of. But at the end of the day, I'm just an outsider looking in. I mean, what do I know about English football? After all, I'm not an Englishman. But I know an English YouTube channel who actually knows a thing or two about English football. Not only that, but I also thought I'd present the other side of the argument as well, on why the golden generation should be considered a failure. AFC Finners is a brilliant channel dedicated to the history of football. If you like short documentaries about the history of the game like I do, well, what are you waiting for? Check it out.
So I'll be looking at whether the English golden generation did indeed fail, and to me, the answer is yes. Hopes were high following England's 5-1 thrashing of Germany in 2001. To many, it seemed as though this would be the start of a new dawn, where England would no longer fall short on the big stage. The first true test was the 2002 World Cup. In the group stage, England drew with both Sweden and Nigeria, but a 1-0 win over Argentina, who knocked England out of the previous World Cup, helped to increase people's hopes. England beat Denmark in the round of 16, and would face Brazil in the quarter-finals. Brazil, who would eventually win the tournament, came away as 2-1 winners, whilst England were out. Now many could say, oh, that was a brilliant Brazil side, and indeed it was. And in terms of the failures at international tournaments during the golden generation, it was by far the least humiliating exit. But unfortunately, you don't win by making excuses. The key problem with England's mentality is making excuses, but this isn't how other teams do it. Brazil, for example, had lost the previous World Cup final, and instead of saying, ooh, that France side was great, they rebuilt and took the trophy home again the next time. If you want to become the best, you have to beat the best, which England did not do. England's next venture was in Euro 2004, which in hindsight was probably their biggest missed opportunity. A young Wayne Rooney burst onto the scene as England recovered from a defeat to France to advance to the knockout round. England faced host Portugal in the quarter-finals. A 2-2 draw which saw Sol Campbell goal controversially ruled out went to penalties. England, as we know all too well, lost in the shootout and were out. People might say it was a good Portugal side, and it was, but this Portugal side lost the final to Greece, and England's squad wasn't exactly short of superstars either. The 2006 World Cup saw England, yep, in the quarter-finals again, and yep, against Portugal again, and, you guessed it, Portugal won on penalties. It was the last significant shot at a trophy from this generation, and once again, they bottled it. And after the departure of Sven-Goran Eriksson, things got even worse. England didn't even qualify for Euro 2008, and the bookend of the golden generation was a 4-1 defeat to Germany in the round of 16 at the World Cup. And so, with those results in mind, can it be said that the golden generation failed? Well, yes. Look at the trophy cabinet. At the end of the day, England's golden generation didn't just fail to win anything, they didn't even get beyond the quarter-final. A squad that had some of the best players in the world, such as Rooney, Lampard, Gerrard, Beckham, Terry and Cole, really should have at least reached the semi-final. Have they succeeded in certain areas? Yes, but do they have any silverware to show for it? No, so on the whole, they have failed. The key thing with failure is, you have to learn from it, and England failed to do that. A key issue with the side was the lack of chemistry. Rio Ferdinand spoke about how he grew up with Frank Lampard, but when the midfielder joined Chelsea, he saw him as a rival and stopped speaking to him. This was the case with many players in the squad, and why there were issues, such as trying to get Lampard and Gerrard to work together in midfield. Under Gareth Southgate, however, club rivalry tends to be put aside, and this has helped to lead to much better results. It is a reason why Spain was so successful under Del Bosque. Spain's starting lineup was often packed with Real Madrid and Barcelona players, with a Sergio Ramos and Carlos Puyol. Players who were arch rivals in El Clasico, but when playing for Spain, it was all put to one side. And 2 European Championships and a World Cup later, it's safe to say it worked. I am of the view that the trophy tells a story, and the best team was the one who won it. There are, of course, the odd exceptions. For example, the Hungarian side of 1954 and the Dutch side of 1974 did not win the World Cup, but their innovative tactical systems have left an influence on football that can still be seen today. England's side of the 2000s, however, have not inspired anyone. A plethora of talent was wasted when they should have really taken the trophy home in that time. As a result, their venture can be viewed as nothing short of a failure, and whilst England have improved under Southgate, they need to understand that, as Vince Lombardi put it, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And so, those are my thoughts on why England failed. Thanks so much to Football Drawn for having me on. Please make sure to check out the collab he did with me as well. Please check out my channel for more videos on football history and ground hopping, and I'll see you soon.
I want to thank AFC Finners for taking part in this video. It's only fair that I put the other side of the debate as well. And who better than a channel that focuses on the history of English football? I'll put the link to his channel in the description. It's honestly one of the most underrated channels out there, and I hope that someday it gets the recognition that it deserves. At the time of making this video, England is going through another golden generation of their own. After going all the way to the final in Euro 2020, a hugely talented squad and Harry Maguire are keen to shine on the world stage in 2022. And unlike the previous golden generation, I feel like there's more to this generation compared to the previous one. There's cohesion, there's chemistry, but also they have the backing of the media. Something that wasn't the case in 2006, where the team had to face a hostile media from the start to the end of the tournament. It'll be interesting on whether it will be enough for England to win the 2022 World Cup. But one thing's for sure, there's a lot of promise in this current England generation.